My name is Emily, 19 years old, and that day was my birthday. But no one was going to remember that because all the eyes, all the laughter, and all the applause were on Linda, my sister. She had just gotten her driver's license and had been selected as a cheerleader for her university's baseball team. So my parents decided to throw a huge achievement celebration party like she had just won a Nobel Prize. White and gold balloons were strung across the backyard. A backdrop showed Linda in her cheerleading uniform, proudly holding up her driver's license, with the words, "We're so proud of you, sweetheart." Mom hired a full event crew: tents, tables, a DJ, a 3-tier cake, even a photography service. The guests flooded in, mostly my parents' friends, distant relatives, Linda's classmates, and a few parents from her school. Everyone was dressed nicely. Some even brought flowers and gifts. I, on the other hand, wore an old dark blue t-shirt and faded jeans, standing in the kitchen helping carry trays of orange juice and arrange sandwiches. No one asked if I was tired. No one asked why I didn't dress up. No one, not even Mom, mentioned it was my birthday even though it fell on the same day as the party. Every time someone walked into the kitchen, I just smiled faintly and looked down to wipe the counter. I had learned long ago that if you can't be the center, the best thing you can do is disappear. Around 4 in the afternoon, the party hit its peak when Dad stepped onto the makeshift stage by the wooden steps, grabbed a microphone, and shouted, "And now, a special surprise for our amazing daughter, Linda." The music turned up. People cheered. One of the event crew members pulled off a white cloth covering the driveway, and underneath it was a brand new, gleaming white Tesla Model 1 Do 3, with a giant red ribbon on the hood. Linda screamed like it was straight out of a movie, jumped up and hugged Dad. Mom ran over to join the hug, tears in her eyes. The crowd around them erupted as if it were the Super Bowl. Cameras and phones went up. Someone shouted, "Hold the key in your left hand and strike a pose." And me, I stood behind the buffet table, still holding a napkin soaked with spilled sauce, wondering if anyone would ask me how I was doing today. After the car reveal, people began to settle down for dinner. Mom walked over to me and handed me a small box wrapped in newspaper. "Here you go," she said, her voice light, like she was handing over a delivery, not giving a birthday present. I took the box, feeling the hard shape beneath the flimsy wrapping. I opened it. Inside was a folding mop, a bottle of floor cleaner, a pair of yellow rubber gloves, and a note that read, "Don't forget to mop the living room before Saturday." I looked up. Mom was smiling, looking proud as if she had given me something truly special. "You're the best at cleaning in the family. This is a lesson in responsibility." I nodded, keeping my face blank. No smile, no tears. I placed the box on the table, bowed my head like an employee ending a shift. Then I walked straight upstairs. No one called after me. No one asked. I opened my closet, pulled out the old gray suitcase I once used for summer camp back in 8th grade. I opened drawers, packed a few clothes, a notebook, charger, and my phone. I grabbed a small water bottle from the desk and tucked in a photo paper clipped with Natalie, the only person who remembered my birthday last year. Everything was tidy. No noise. I rolled my suitcase down the stairs, passed through the living room full of people. No one noticed. When I stepped out the front door, the late afternoon sun was still blazing. Linda was posing for photos with the Tesla. My parents were busy entertaining guests. I didn't leave a letter. There was no need. Because I knew if I said, "I'm feeling hurt," they'd say I was too sensitive. If I said, "Today is my birthday," they'd call me selfish, unable to share the spotlight. So I stayed silent. And for the first time in my life, I chose myself. I don't remember exactly when I became the thoughtful child. I only remember that when I was 13, Linda came down with a sore throat and had to stay home from school for 3 days. That evening, Mom placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "Can you make porridge for your sister? I have a parent meeting to attend." I didn't say no. I didn't think it was anything big. I started the rice cooker, washed the vegetables, set a pot on the stove, and fumbled through a few simple dishes I had seen Mom throw together before. That night, Linda complained the porridge was bland. Dad frowned and said I wasn't as skilled as Mom. But Mom smiled. At least you did it. Good job. Jaden would never know how to do something like that, I nodded. And in my heart, I thought that was a compliment. From that day on, housework quietly became my responsibility. I cooked on weekends. I cleaned the kitchen at night. Once, when an aunt came over with her newborn baby, Mom handed the baby straight to me, then turned to Linda with a laugh. "You're no good at holding babies, let Emily do it." I thought it meant trust. I believed that if I just worked hard, stayed quiet, and did everything well, then one day, I would be loved the way Linda was. But that day never came. I remember the birthdays that were forgotten. When I turned 15, Mom said, "Let's keep it simple this year. We've got a lot going on." I nodded. Linda still had her party with friends. Jaden still got a superhero cake. Me? Just an ordinary dinner. No cake, no candles, no one said happy birthday. I didn't get angry. I even poured the drinks, cleared the table, and smiled when Dad said, "You're the easiest one to raise." That night, I waited for Mom to say something. Just one sentence. But all she did was smile tiredly and say, "You don't need praise, you're the most mature one in the family." I remember forcing a smile, then I got up and washed the dishes like every other night. Every afternoon after school, I rushed to the neighborhood bakery to work a part-time job. It wasn't hard work just manning the counter, tidying the candy display, mopping the floor, wrapping takeout orders. I worked hard and saved every cent to buy books, to pay for my own math tutoring. Meanwhile, Linda took drawing lessons, piano lessons, modern dance classes. When I asked Mom if I could join a weekend photography class at the city library, she shook her head. "That's not practical. Focus on your academics and stop wasting time." There was one time I won third place in the district science fair. My project was on reusing rainwater for daily living. I had stayed up for nights testing pH levels, writing my report, building a model. When I brought the certificate home, my hands trembled as I handed it to Mom. She glanced at it and said, "Not bad, but make sure you don't stay up too late. The eldest has to stay healthy so you can carry more." Dad walked past me to ask Linda how her cheer practice went. I stood there, the certificate in my hand, feeling as weightless as a blank piece of paper. I was never called special. I was only ever called Big Sister, or the responsible one, or the nail that holds the house together. Those words sounded like praise, but they were really chains. Whenever Jaden spilled something on the floor, Mom didn't scold him. She looked at me and said, "He's still young, clean it up for him, would you?" Every time Linda talked back to Dad, Mom would sigh and say, "You're the big sister, can't you let her win this one?" In this house, every mistake bent itself toward me, the one who was expected to know better. I once wished I could make a huge mistake just to be defended for once, but I never got that chance. Because I had become too good at doing everything right. Too good at following the rules, at stepping aside, at staying silent. And that made me the person no one ever had to look at again. I remember one rainy evening. I was scrubbing the floor when Mom called me over. Linda had just had a fight with her boyfriend. Mom looked worried, her hand gripping the phone, her face tense. "Emily, go into your sister's room and tidy up a bit, put away the mess, get some warm water ready. And don't say anything, let her calm down, and I'll talk to her later." I did what she asked. I always did. And afterward, when Linda locked her door, I sat alone on the porch watching the rain fall, thinking maybe I was the only one in this house, without a corner to fall apart in. Love in my family wasn't warmth, it was role play. Whoever played the eldest daughter would carry the weight and wasn't allowed to complain. Whoever played the princess was always forgiven. The youngest always got their way. And I, since I was 13, had stepped into that role without a script. No one asked me to. But no one stopped me either. Because when someone's already carrying the load for you, why would you ever learn how to carry it yourself? I used to believe that if I was just more patient, more quiet, more selfless, then one day, I'd finally be recognized. But slowly, I realized, in families like this, the more capable you are, the the more invisible you become. Because if you handle pain too well, they assume you don't feel it. If you never ask, they assume you need nothing, and if you never speak, they assume you have nothing to say. I lived in a house full of people, but it always felt like I was just a shadow. A shadow moving through the kitchen, the living room, the bathroom, quietly cleaning up the messes other people left behind, without anyone ever stopping to ask, "Are you okay?" And that shadow, after 19 years, finally stepped out of the frame. Not with a scream, not with blame. Just quietly, but with finality. I walked away like I was just stepping out to buy something. No one followed. No voice called after me, no glance of concern, not even a goodbye. The front yard was still buzzing with laughter. Linda was still beaming beside the Tesla, holding a fruit drink, retelling the emotional moment of receiving her gift. And me, I was just a shadow passing through the middle of their lives. No sound, no reflection, just me, alone, with an old suitcase rolling across a sun-dappled sidewalk. I had no clear plan. Didn't know where I was going. In my pocket was just a bit of cash from the bakery shifts and a card with a couple $100 left on it. My phone was in airplane mode because I didn't want to receive any messages, though I knew there likely wouldn't be any. I walked for over an hour, past a few quiet neighborhoods and a small park, until I stopped in front of a pale blue wooden house, the one place where someone had always listened to me without needing me to prove anything. Natalie's house. I didn't text ahead. Didn't call. Just sat down quietly on the steps, pulled the suitcase close to me, rested my chin on my knees, and let out a long breath. The wind moved through my hair. Everything was still. My hands still smelled faintly of floor cleaner from that morning. I sat there for almost half an hour, my eyes blurring from dryness and fatigue. I didn't cry. But something inside me had broken, not with sound, not with tears. Just an echoing emptiness, as if I had finally cut myself free from an old, worn-out version of who I used to be. The door opened softly. Natalie stood there, her hair tied up high, holding a warm cup of tea in her hand. She didn't look surprised. She didn't ask any questions. She simply said, "Come in. You don't have to explain. I already know." I stood up, trying to smile, but couldn't. Stepping into that house felt like stepping into a world where I didn't have to earn acceptance by doing anything. The small living room smelled of mint and cookies. Natalie placed my suitcase by the wall, then went to get me a light blanket and a glass of water. "You can stay in the living room for now." I just changed the sheets on my bed. I nodded, sat down on the mattress she had laid out, and hugged the pillow as if I were trying to hold the scattered pieces of myself together. Natalie didn't say anything else. She just turned on a warm yellow light, went into the kitchen, and came back with a plate of egg sandwiches and sliced apples. "Eat something, then rest. Tomorrow, I can go to the market and grab more food for you." I swallowed hard, not from hunger but because, for the first time all day, someone had asked me if I wanted to eat. That night, I lay on my side on the mattress, eyes wide open, staring at the white ceiling. Outside the window, the streetlights glowed softly. There was no sound of Mom knocking to wake me up to clean. No yelling from Linda about something missing. No Jaden whining that he was hungry at midnight. Just the slow whirl of the ceiling fan, the steady breathing of Natalie from the next room, and my own heartbeat, small but loud in my chest. I placed a hand over my heart, closed my eyes, and whispered to myself, as if to confirm something I needed to believe. "So this is it. I've really left." Not out of anger, not to run away, just simply to choose freedom. A kind of freedom no one gives you, no one recognizes, but one that's real because it comes from a decision that's truly your own. The next morning, I woke to the sound of birds singing in the distance. Sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, as if there had never been a storm in my life. I sat up, folded the blanket, fluffed the pillow back in place, then quietly stepped into the kitchen. Natalie was making coffee, her hair a little messy, wearing an oversized t-shirt and a sleepy smile. She pushed a cup toward me. "How does your first morning of freedom feel?" I sat down, picked up the cup, breathed in deeply, and looked out the window where sunlight touched the rooftops gently. It feels like I just took my first breath in years. We didn't talk much that day. Natalie invited me to walk with her to the park nearby. We sat on a bench, surrounded by laughing children. I told her everything from the box wrapped in newspaper to the blank look on Mom's face as she handed it to me. Natalie didn't interrupt, she just placed her hand over mine and gave it a gentle squeeze. Emily, you don't need anyone to see you to prove you exist. I see you. And you deserve more than a mop. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote the first line. Day 1, a life that doesn't need permission to begin. And that was how I began. Not with a bang, not with defiance, but with a small step fully intentional. I no longer waited for others to assign me value. I started giving it to myself. On the third morning since I left home, I was making ginger tea in the kitchen when my phone rang. The screen lit up with a name I had never dared to ignore in all 19 years of my life. Mom. My hand froze. My heart clenched like it was being yanked backward toward the house where burnt food, scolding voices, and sugar-coated control always lingered. I didn't answer right away. Let it ring. The third time, I finally tapped the green button without saying a word. Emily? My mother's voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying all night. Where are you? Do you have any idea how worried we've been? The whole family is panicking. Linda couldn't sleep. Your father is so upset he can't even eat. I stayed silent. She went on, her voice cracking. I know you're going through a crisis. Maybe it's the pressure from school, from life. You don't have to prove anything anymore. Just come home. Come back, honey. Everything will be okay again. I bit my lower lip and sat down, still holding a cup of tea I hadn't stirred. I didn't cry. But something in my chest ached not because I was touched, but because I realized, even now, they still refused to call things by their name. To them, my leaving wasn't the result of built-up pain or repressed hurt, it was just a temporary crisis. I had become a disorder, a glitch in the system, not a person reclaiming herself. That afternoon, I got a call from my father. No sobs like Mom. His voice was cold, sharp as a winter wind. Emily, I'll be direct. This family is in chaos because of your impulsiveness and selfishness. If everyone acted like you, society would collapse. You're grown now, you should know how to endure. Everything in this household is about keeping appearances. What you've done is drag mud across our faces. The neighbors, the relatives, they're all asking questions. Do you want this family to lose face? I didn't respond. He exhaled hard through his nose, like trying to control his anger. I don't have time to coddle you, think about it. If you still care about your reputation, come back, immediately. I hung up. No tears, no reaction. I just opened my phone, went to Instagram and saw that Linda had just posted a long story. Black background, white text. Growing up means facing things, not running away. If you leave home, you're not an adult. I froze. Not because I was shocked, but because everything suddenly became so clear. To them, I had never truly been part of the family. I was the one who held the door, who kept the kitchen, who stayed quiet, and when I left, they weren't grieving me. They were grieving the one who held everything together for them. That night, while checking my email, I saw a notification from the bank. The secondary savings account beneficiary has been changed to Linda M. Hughes. A chill ran through me. It was the account Mom asked me to co-sign when I was 15 to learn how to manage money. I had never touched the funds, believing it was for emergencies for the family. Now I understood, everything they asked me to hold onto was just a backup they could reclaim the moment they needed. The next day, I went to the nearest bank branch near Natalie's house, carrying documents and a handwritten request. I asked the staff to terminate all financial ties with my family. Remove my name from joint accounts, revoke my access to any beneficiary accounts, and my co-signer status on Mom's credit cards. They confirmed it after a few procedures. I walked out strangely light. On the way home, I called the utility companies where I had once co-signed the home service contracts and requested to cancel all guarantees. Then came the family insurance I had signed on Dad's behalf when he couldn't make it in person. I canceled that too. Each phone call, each signature, felt like another link falling from my hands. Every small step cold and ruthless to anyone watching was, for me, an act of self-defense. I could no longer stand as guarantor for a system that only functioned through my silent endurance. I could no longer be the shadow keeping the house lit while I lived in darkness. That evening, Natalie walked into the room with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. She sat beside me and asked gently, "Did they call again?" I nodded. She didn't ask for details. She simply pushed 1 mug toward me and said, "You don't have to respond. They're trying to pull you back into your old role. But you've already broken free. Don't let them rewrite this story." I held the cup, watched the steam curl into the air, and in that moment I knew. I wasn't going back, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because I no longer recognized myself in the role they once forced me to play. And I began to understand, not all crises come from the ones who leave. Some are born from those who never knew how to love without conditions, who never knew how to say sorry without adding a clause, who never realized that family can't be held together by control, it can only survive through respect. And I, Emily, had chosen not to live in a house sustained by a love that never truly listened. That morning, I was dusting the bookshelf in Natalie's living room when the doorbell rang. Natalie was in the kitchen toasting bread and called out, "I'll get it, okay?" I nodded, set the book down, and followed her to the door. When it opened, I saw someone I never expected to show up so soon, Grandma Lana. She stood tall, thinner than I remembered, her silver hair neatly pinned back, holding a paper bag of cookies and a box of Lotus tea. Her aging eyes held no urgency, no judgment, just a rare stillness, as if she already knew everything. "Hello, Emily," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I'm not here to bring you home, I just wanted to see you with my own eyes." He hesitated. I couldn't tell if it was emotion, or the uncertainty of how to receive her. Was she family, or just another visitor? Natalie stepped forward, opened the door wider, and smiled. "I'm Natalie, Emily's best friend. Please, come in. I just brewed ginger tea and made some cinnamon toast." Grandma nodded politely. "Thank you, dear, I won't stay long." We sat around the small wooden table by the window, where sunlight filtered through the white curtain and made everything feel softer, warmer. She reached into her bag and placed a tin of round cookies in the center of the table. "I remembered you liked these," she said, then poured tea into the cup in front of me. "Back then, whenever your mother scolded you, you'd sit in the corner of my kitchen, nibbling these like they were the only thing in the world that understood you." I looked at her, eyes stinging but without tears. She continued, without needing me to say a word. "I heard from your mother," she said. "They told me you ran away from home over something trivial out of jealousy for Linda, over a mop as a gift." She paused. I didn't believe them. I tightened my grip around the teacup and stayed silent. She looked at me, her gaze cutting through all the layers I'd wrapped around myself. "Emily, do you know why I understand you?" I shook my head. She smiled a weary smile, but full of knowing. "Because I was once you. The youngest daughter in a family with 5 older brothers. The one who served meals, washed dishes, folded laundry, watched the babies while the boys were called the future of the family. The day I got accepted into the teacher's college, all they said was, well, at least that solves the marriage problem for her. No one asked me what I wanted." I swallowed hard. She went on. "They said they loved me by telling me I had to sacrifice. They said they cared for me by telling me to stay silent, and I believed them. I spent half my life believing that if I gave enough, if I was kind enough, if I endured enough, I would be seen." Her eyes met mine, steady and clear. "But no, Emily. People don't recognize the value of the one who always yields. They only learn how to lean harder." The room fell silent for a while. Just the soft clink of a spoon against a teacup. Then she reached into the bag beside her and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook, placing it in front of me. "I brought this for you. Not a journal. A reminder." I opened the cover. Inside were blank pages except for one line on the first page, written in her slanted, delicate handwriting. Write down everything you've ever done for others, every gift, every time you gave way, every late night, every tear you hid, and then ask yourself, has anyone ever done the same for you? My fingers traced the ink. A sharp ache bloomed in my chest as if someone had just laid my entire life bare with a single sentence. She spoke again, slowly, deliberately. You can forgive. Forgiveness is noble, but you don't have to go back in order to do it. Forgiveness doesn't mean bowing your head and walking into the place that broke you. Sometimes, forgiveness is simply choosing to live a life that doesn't hurt anymore. I don't know how long I sat there after she said that. I only remember Natalie staying silent, just nodding, as if quietly agreeing. I felt like someone had held up a mirror not to my face, but to the years I had lived through. Years I had never really looked at before. When Grandma stood to leave, she took my hand, not tightly, not pleading, just a gentle, warm touch. You have the right to choose again. Don't let anyone, not even those who share your blood, take that away from you. I walked her to the door and stood quietly, watching as her figure faded behind the trees. That day, there was no sun. But inside me, something lit up, not bright, not overwhelming, but the quiet light of someone who had finally seen the path she could walk on her own. With legs no longer trembling from the fear of disappointing someone else. And for the first time, I believed that true forgiveness isn't about turning back, it's about daring to move forward without ever looking behind again. I left Natalie's house on a morning in April, when dew still clung to the tips of the grass and the wind brushed cold against my collar. Not because we had any disagreement. Natalie had said, whenever you're ready to go, just go. I'm not here to hold you back or push you forward, but I know you need a place that's truly yours. She walked me to the bus stop, handed me a box of egg sandwiches and a handwritten note. If one day you start missing home, remember this, you already built another one, from the ashes of the old. I laughed, hugged her tightly, then got on the bus with nothing but a suitcase, a backpack, and a soul still carrying wounds that hadn't yet healed. I arrived in Oregon after a 6-hour trip, a small mountain town with soft weather and cobblestone streets. No one knew who I was, and no one cared. That, somehow, felt freeing. I rented a small room on the 3rd floor of an old house, with a window overlooking the backyard garden where birds lined the wires every morning. The landlords were an elderly couple, Emma and Harold, gentle, quiet, asking nothing more than, just live peacefully, and we'll be happy. Near the house was a little cafe called Maple and Ink, where the scent of cinnamon pastries lingered from dawn, and jazz music played at just the right volume. I applied for a part-time job, not expecting much. But the manager, a woman named Jules, hired me after a short interview. We don't need fancy degrees here, she smiled. We just need someone who listens to customers and spells their names right on the cup. That was how I began my first days in Oregon, pulling espresso shots, learning how to make macchiatos, memorizing the regulars' preferences, and learning the names of every plant on the tables. At night, when the little room turned still and quiet, I'd open my laptop, pull out a box of supplies from under the bed, and start crafting the scented candles and essential oils I'd experimented with back when I lived with Natalie. At first, it was just a hobby. But slowly, kind words trickled in from old friends, and one day, I decided to open an Etsy shop. I didn't pick some polished name like Glow and Grace or Serenity Studio. I named the shop, not the second choice. I cried as I typed those words. Because I knew there are hundreds, thousands out there who have felt like the second choice in their own families, in love, in work, in their very existence. I crafted each candle by hand, blending lavender, mint, and dried orange peel. And on every label, I didn't print ingredients or promised effects, I wrote stories. A candle named Rain After Rage came with this message. Have you ever cleaned the kitchen after someone else's outburst? And wondered who would clean up the wreckage inside you? A bottle of essential oil called Quiet Triumph was labeled with, "The greatest victory is when you walk away in silence," without needing anyone to acknowledge what they've lost. The stories began to spread. Orders increased, and I realized I wasn't alone. The messages, emails, and product reviews didn't just say, "Great quality." They said, "Your story is exactly like mine." I cried reading that description. You don't know it, but you just saved a stranger with your words. I didn't know whether to thank them or apologize for the pain we all seem to share, but I knew this. The silence I once endured was now becoming a voice. I created a Facebook group called We Are Not Household Tools. At first, just a few friends joined. Then one person invited another. Each week, I posted a prompt. Share a time you were called selfish for simply wanting time to yourself. Share the worst gift you ever received from a family member and what it really said about your place in their life. Comments poured in by the hundreds. One person said they were given a vacuum for their birthday. Another recalled being left alone at school because their parents forgot to pick them up, too busy driving the older sister to a singing contest. Someone wrote only one sentence. I've never been called by my name, they just called me her sister. I sat in front of my screen, reading every line, tears spilling down not from pain, but because for the first time, I felt like there was an army of the once invisible, all stepping out of the shadows. I started a blog, one post every week. Not to give advice. Not to play the expert. Just to tell the fragments of the life I once lived. The times I was called the strong one. The dinners where no one asked, "How was your day?" The so-called lessons in responsibility that were really just childhood stolen away. I wrote in a quiet tone, no rage, no bitterness. I simply told the truth, as a way of loosening the knots in my chest. The first post I shared was titled, I got a mop for my birthday, and that was the moment I chose freedom. It was shared over 3,000 times in 3 days. Someone mailed me a handwritten letter. Another messaged, I gave myself a day off. For the first time in 12 years of being a mom and never daring to breathe. Someone wrote, I printed your post and taped it to my mirror. So every morning I remember, I no longer have to live just to please someone else. And 2. The small room I rented wasn't spacious, the ceiling was low, the hallway, old and creaky. But every night, as I sat surrounded by the scent of candles I'd made with my own hands, reading messages from strangers all over the world, I felt like I was living in a silent ocean where those once trapped in roles of service were slowly stepping out, standing tall, and naming their pain. I wasn't rich, I wasn't famous, but I was free. Free from the role, free from the expectations. Free from the kind of love that only knows how to demand but never how to listen. And every night, before going to sleep, I wrote the same sentence in the notebook Grandma gave me. Today, I lived for me. No one else. And I smiled because for me, that alone was a kind of rebirth. One early afternoon in June, I was packing the last order of the week when I heard the postman's footsteps pause at the door. The soft thud of an envelope sliding through the mail slot was familiar, but this time, something about it felt different. When I picked it up, I immediately recognized the handwriting. Round, slightly slanted, with a faint tremble, my mother's. I didn't need to open it to know this wasn't a friendly letter or a casual greeting. The sender's line was unmistakably clear. From the family of Emily Hughes. I.N.F. I brought the letter inside, placed it on the table, and went back to my work as if I hadn't seen it. I didn't rush to open it. I had learned how to sit still in front of the things that used to make me tremble. Not until nightfall, when the only light left in the room came from the soft yellow glow of the desk lamp, did I quietly use a letter opener to slice the envelope open. Inside was a handwritten letter from my mother, along with 2 smaller notes, one from my father, one from Linda. The first line from Mom stopped me cold. Emily, I'm sorry this letter comes so late, but yesterday, your sister nearly died in a car accident. I kept reading. It turned out Linda had been driving the Tesla on a rainy evening while live streaming with friends on her phone. She lost control and crashed into a lamppost. No one was seriously hurt, but the front of the car was mangled. Mom wrote that Linda had cried all night, spiraling in the hospital, screaming that, I don't know what to do, no one ever taught me how to stay calm. Dad hadn't slept, and Mom, according to her words, fainted in the living room after receiving the call from the police. I pictured the house I used to clean dishes in every night now, filled with panic, chaos, unraveling without someone to hold it all together. And I understood, they didn't need me. They needed someone to do the things they never bothered to learn. The next page was from Dad. It was short, stiff, like always. You were the pillar, and now we see that. What you did can't just be replaced. I understand that now. If you come back, this family won't be the same again. I turned over the final page, the note from Linda. Her handwriting was neat, each initial letter shaded with care. I don't know why you were so angry you had to leave. I thought you just needed a break. But now I understand, without you, everything fell apart. I'm not asking you to come back. I just hope you read this and know. For the first time, I see you not as the one who carries everything, but as a human being. I'm sorry. I set the letter down. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. Just a feeling. Quiet, not empty but peaceful. Like a wound that had finally closed, and when someone touched it, there was only a thin layer of skin left. No more pain. I opened my laptop and wrote an email, not long, not angry, not bitter. Just a declaration. As if I were reading it aloud to myself. From Emily. To Mom, Dad, Linda. Subject. About responsibility. When responsibility comes without love, it is nothing more than exploitation wrapped in virtue. For years, I lived as if duty was the only currency I had to earn my right to exist. But now I know if love requires me to forget myself just to preserve it, then it is no longer love. It's a burden. And I've already laid it down. I hit send without hesitation. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't expect one. It felt like closing a chapter in an old book, not because I hated it, but because I no longer belonged in it. That evening, Natalie stopped by with a basket of fresh strawberries and 2 cans of cold soda. We sat on the front porch, looking out at the garden where the yellow light glowed against the lavender bushes. I showed her the letter. She read it, then sat in silence for a while before turning to ask, "Do you feel vindicated? Now that your family finally realizes how much you mattered?" I shook my head, smiling softly. "Number, I just feel light, really light. Because at last, I've stopped waiting for them to understand." I leaned back against the wall and took a long breath. I used to imagine the moment I'd return home, they'd apologize, I'd be acknowledged. But now, I don't need that anymore. I don't need the apology. I don't need the recognition. I just need to never go back to being the one holding up a house that always tilted toward one side. We sat there for a long time. No more words were needed, just letting the memories drift quietly like the evening breeze, not clinging, not regretting. Summer in Oregon wasn't loud like other places. There were no cicadas screaming through the heat, no sun scorching the porch. Every morning, I woke early, put the kettle on, started the day with the scent of mint and lemon floating through the room. I packed each order from my little shop, not the second choice, which now had nearly 2,000 loyal followers on Etsy. I always slipped a handwritten note into every box. Not pre-printed, not copy-pasted. Just a few lines written in the quiet of morning before the world could interrupt my thoughts. You are worthy not because you're perfect, but because you are you. I never knew who would receive those lines. Maybe a girl in New Jersey who'd just left a toxic home. Maybe a woman in Texas who had finally filed for divorce after 10 years of silent suffering. But I knew this. Some words are not meant to impress. They're written so someone else won't feel alone in what they still can't say out loud. If you've ever received a gift that didn't match your heart, a mop instead of a congratulations, a reminder instead of a hug, a lesson in responsibility instead of a gentle acknowledgement, then I want you to know. You're not alone. I've stood in that place. Smiled quietly while everyone applauded someone else. Pretended I was fine while holding a gift that only reminded me I was carrying the weight meant for everyone else in the house. And you know what? The fact that it hurt you doesn't make you ungrateful. It only means you were honest with your feelings. And that's the bravest thing someone who's always been called the responsible one can do. If someone has ever used the word responsibility as a chain to keep you quiet, to make you clean up, sacrifice, give way, and never complain, then let me say this to you. You are not wrong for wanting to breathe. You are not wrong for wanting to set it down. You are not wrong for saying, enough. Responsibility is not love if it only flows one way. It is not noble if it demands that you ignore your own pain just to keep others comfortable. And if you've ever wondered whether you're allowed to reject the role they assigned you long before you were old enough to object, the answer is yes, you are allowed, and you don't need permission. You are not selfish for choosing yourself first. We've been taught that sacrifice is the measure of worth, that the more we endure, the more lovable we are. But the truth is, real love doesn't ask you to disappear. It doesn't force you to swallow your pain. It doesn't demand that you shrink just so someone else can feel full. True love, whether it comes from family, a partner, friends, or the world, is the kind that helps you grow, not shrink. And if you're reading this right now, maybe on an old phone, in a tiny rented room, or in the quiet of night when everyone else is asleep, I want you to know you are not invisible. These words are for you. A soft whisper through the screen. I've been there, and I found my way out, so you can too. Leave a comment. I deserve a life I don't have to prove myself for.